So hello and a very warm welcome to all our panelists and participants today. I'm Luciana Aguiar and I'm the head of Business Call to Action, a global inclusive business platform advancing core business solutions that engage people living with less than $8 a day as producers, business partners, employees, or clients. So BCtA is part of a unique multilateral alliance between governments, including the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, the Swiss Agency of Development and Cooperation, and the United Nations Development Program. So our topic today is solutions and support for women-led businesses to navigate the COVID-19 crisis. This webinar is a joint initiative of Business Call to Action and the IFC, and it's a part of a series of activities to help women entrepreneurs to maximize opportunities, overcome common barriers, and grow their inclusive business. So we support women entrepreneurs that are developing inclusive business models and purpose-driven businesses that are advancing solutions to complex global problems. Yet they face numerous financial, non-financial barriers, as you all know, that hinder their growth. So in our discussion today, we'll talk about the impact of COVID on women business owners and highlight some opportunities that can help them overcome barriers and plan for crisis response and recovery. So our webinar today will address 5 themes. They relate to addressing the needs of women-led inclusive business, challenges faced by women-owned business during the COVID crisis and IFC's response, what women-owned business need during COVID crisis, COVID impact on SMEs and recommendations to cope and recover from crisis, and bringing MSMEs into the digital economy with a dedicated focus on women. Our first panelist and co-host of this initiative for today is Heather Kipnis. She's the Women's Entrepreneurship Product Lead for IFC, Gender and Economic Inclusion Group. Our second panelist is Mahin Adamji, who is the co-founder and CEO of DotOnline, an education technology startup with presence in over four major cities in Pakistan, running over 200 learning centers across the country. Our third panelist is Pura Mendez, is the women segment manager at the bank BHD León in the Dominican Republic, and is in charge of the implementation of the bank's gender strategy. Our final panelist, final but not least, is Nili Klenoff, who is the Senior Vice President of Global Product Management Acceptance Solutions at Mastercard, and by the way, is one of Business Call to Action member companies. In this role, she's responsible for optimizing Mastercard's acceptance footprint, including leading Mastercard's global go-to-market strategy for contactless payments. Before we start, just a brief housekeeping note for you. We'll have time after the presentations for live questions and answers. You can engage with us using the chat function on your screen. We also encourage you to send your questions throughout the webinar. So I'd just like to bring some small numbers and information for you that's quite important about Business Call to Action. But also I'd like to bring to you the fact that BCtA is part of the UNDP, and we are hosted inside of the Istanbul International Development Center. So we are glad to have today Saba Sobani, our director from the IICPSD from UNDP. He will moderate this panel with us. So bringing some small numbers, and particularly because we're talking about women-led companies, I'd like to address two small things related to numbers that can at least put in context a little bit what we are going to talk today. Bringing a little bit more the lens of women that are women entrepreneurs that are supporting business that are mission driven, that are tackling poverty and inequality in different ways. So what's interesting to see is that almost 90% of men and women globally are biased against women. So women are also part of this problem. And women entrepreneurs are facing a range of financial and non-financial challenges in realizing their growth potential, and most likely to in what refers to the access to finance as a major constraint for their business operation. What we can see in terms of the numbers that call our attention is that 40% of people believe men make better business than women. And only 22% of the share of senior business leadership positions are held by women globally. So it would be what is interesting to see, and there is a set of information that supports this idea, is that around 5.3 trillion would be the increase in global GDP if we close the gender gap in economic participation by 25% in 2020. So the point that I'd like to bring, particularly considering the COVID crisis, is that this crisis is striking particularly women, and and it has a very strong impact on them. And this crisis will probably plunge a huge number of people, around 40 to 60 million people this year, into poverty again. So these are issues that we are very strongly concerned, and also we would like to address this particularly along our conversation today. Of course, that there are issues that call our attention in particularly when we look to the access of women to basic access to internet. For instance, if you look across geographies, and if you consider Africa, women remain underrepresented not only in the technology sector, but around 25% of them have fewer access to basic internet connection if compared with men. So these are issues that in fact add more challenges to women-led business and to women leaders inside of their activities. So these are things that we should look carefully, and this is something that we are going to address in this conversation today. So BCtA is developing a series of activities targeting women-led business. So we launched the peer-to-peer learning network for women-led inclusive business. And this is a very interesting network because it's a very well-connected dialogue with women, trying to understand what are their needs and how we can fill the gaps and support them in their journey in developing their business. So we are looking particularly to solutions that can connect them in exchanging ideas with experts, such as this series of webinars, gaining insights on financial facilities, codifying best practices, sharing case studies, learning new opportunities, and articulating their needs and challenges in seeing how we can support them to be better connected with the sources of information and networks that can support them. So this is a series of activities that we have developed not only on webinars, but also in these peer-to-peer sessions that we've made along these last months. So I'd like to introduce Saba Sobani, as I already did, but Saba will be moderating this session today. Saba, very welcome. Saba is our director in the ISPSD in UNDP. So Saba, welcome. The floor is yours. Over to you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
My apologies. I just wanted to say that we live in a conundrum, a world conundrum, where societies that had women leaders and more equitable representation of women in all levels of decision making have done a much better job in dealing with the pandemic. At the same time, we're dealing in a situation where we will see significant gender disparity impact of the COVID sort of pandemic across the world, when you're dealing from unpaid care, looking at all the issues around the economic space. So in this context, I think this discussion will give us some insight in terms of what are the challenges and what are the solutions that we can draw upon collectively, both at the firm level, at the collective action business level, but also how we can bring in other stakeholders to really play this role. So my first question is for Heather. From your perspective, IFC has had a lot of experience supporting women business owners through its various initiatives, and it really pivoted in terms of response to its pandemic with a set of these financial instruments, technical packages. 3 months into this could you tell us more about what you've been doing? What has been some of the challenges and opportunities for women-owned businesses, and how IFC is addressing them?
So thanks so much, Saba, for the question. And also, it's an absolute delight to be co-hosting this webinar on this really important topic. So and let me just quickly start off. I don't think many folks may not know who IFC is. And for those that don't, we're the International Finance Corporation. We are a sister organization to the World Bank and a member of the World Bank Group, and which is the largest global development institution focused on the private sector and emerging markets. And we work with over 2,000 businesses worldwide, providing investment and advice. And the topic of women entrepreneurship is, it's a priority. I mean, women are creating jobs, they're generating income, and really boosting revenues, and but also facing a lot of inequalities in terms of access to business resources. And those inequalities have really been exacerbated by the pandemic. If you can go to the next slide. So to answer your question, Saba, I'll just quickly highlight what we're seeing in terms of how the pandemic is affecting women and men differently, what that means for women entrepreneurs, and the solutions that we're addressing. And at the end of this slide deck, I do have some resources to networks and tools, links to networks, tools, and resources, so hopefully we can share that at some point. Okay, next. So the pandemic, I mean, Luciana had highlighted some statistics around perceptions of women in business, and those perceptions do influence inequalities that have already existed. And what we're seeing with the pandemic is that this has aggravated existing gender gaps in economic security, health and safety, and decision making. And there's quite a few inequalities that are being exacerbated, and I'll just highlight four that are directly influencing entrepreneurs. And one is around the care agenda. What we do know is that women spend 3 times the amount of time on unpaid care than men. And with the pandemic, schools are being closed, daycares are being closed, and there's also the topic of elder care in terms of elder care facility being enclosed. And so what has happened is this is because there's also social norms that put pressure to carry this disproportionate amount of unpaid care work. We're finding that women, in particular women entrepreneurs, are not having the time that they had to be able to dedicate to their business, which has direct implications on income generation. Another effect that we're seeing differently between women and men is also around the safety of women. And this is particularly because confinements at home and restrictions on movement are exposing women to violent partners. And we're seeing an increase in gender-based violence. And this is also taking different forms. It's not only with domestic violence, but it's also within businesses in terms of, customers are becoming more aggressive with businesses. There's also sexual harassment, and this can happen online as well, in sexual exploitation. And so this is something that is also impacting women's ability to work and to run their businesses. And then the other two effects that are affecting women and men differently, we all are very well aware of women's limited access to finance, and the credit gap is estimated at 1.48 trillion. And given the liquidity constraints, particularly around the pandemic and the need for flexible financing for women to be able to survive, is even more challenging and exacerbating this the already existing financing gap. And Luciana had alluded to around access to internet. And so we're doing this conversation today online, and we're seeing the shift to a digital environment. And in a lot of places, women don't have equal access to the internet, to mobile phones. And for women entrepreneurs that are operating businesses and need to move into a to digitize their businesses, they don't necessarily have the access that they could be afforded to. And so this is a challenge for entrepreneurs as well. So so let me highlight some of the areas that we've identified in addition to these. If you can go to the next slide. So we have been with our partners, doing surveys, conducting interviews, having conversations with our clients, conducting roundtables. And across all of these different efforts, I've gathered together really 7 areas where we're seeing the impact of COVID on women entrepreneurs. And those inequalities and gaps that I highlighted earlier are contributing to these. And so I'll quickly walk through these to give you the holistic perspective, but I mean, the key message here is that these are not mutually exclusive, and they're and all of them are quite related. So if you could go to the next slide. Oh, apologies, there's animations, so go ahead and hit it again. That's great. So this is quite a detailed slide, but I'll focus on the financial and supply chain disruptions. Our partner, WeConnect International, recently did a survey with over 600 women business owners in their network. And not surprising, but 90% of them mentioned that they're facing a decrease in sales. I mean, we're seeing demand plummeting, and particularly in sectors where women entrepreneurs are operating, so our tourism, retail, and food services. And what is very concerning is that a lot of small businesses don't have enough cash reserves to weather this pandemic over an extended period of times. And so survival rates are less than 3 months. And so there really is an urgent need for flexible financing. And related to these challenges is disruptions in the supply chain. The Aspen Network of Development Entrepreneurs, Andy, another IFC partner, found that over 60% of the businesses in their network are unable to deliver on existing challenges due to logistical challenges. So shipping delays, air transport delays. This is all making it difficult to be able to deliver goods and services, and also the inability to source raw materials and inputs for products. But also related to this is labor shortages, given quarantines, and also just the fear of contagion and catching the pandemic. But on the other side of this, there is a huge movement and a shift to digital business. And I know my co-panelist, Nili from Mastercard, will talk more about this. And this is also a challenge and an opportunity. I mean, so the World Bank is running a program in the Middle East and North Africa on e-commerce, and what they found with their business is that 87% plan to sell online due to COVID. What's interesting is they also found that those already selling online are not expecting a downturn in sales. And so they're really, this just reiterates the need for business to think about how to go digital, and particularly around e-commerce. And so what's promising is we're also seeing women entrepreneurs adjust their operations. So related to technology, it's using digital ways to engage customers, suppliers, distributors. A lot of communications are now going digital to be able to inform customers on delivery dates, on any type of delays. But also what we're seeing with some of our clients and entrepreneurs is that they're finding out ways to do digital payments, online payments with suppliers and distributors. So it's quite promising to see the pivot in terms of new operations. That said, we're also learning that women entrepreneurs are expressing a need to get advice on how to make these pivots. What we know is that women entrepreneurs, and this is pre-COVID, already operate with smaller and less diverse networks than men. And so there is a challenge in terms of finding out where to go to find the right advice and to get it in as quickly as possible. And this is particularly around that shift to a digital business and around crisis management and business resilience strategies. And the 2 other areas I do want to highlight in terms of challenges, and this has come up quite a bit, is around mental health, and it's related to employee support as well. But I think we've all experienced this, is that the pandemic has really increased levels of stress and anxiety. And for women entrepreneurs, this is directly related to the feelings that they're not as productive as they could be given the challenges that they're facing, and also the disproportionate increase in care responsibilities is contributing to that. But I would say also part of this is the uncertainty around how to manage potential losses and existing losses, and also how to be able to support employees and the health of employees. And what we're finding is that more than a third of these businesses have had to reduce their number of employees, whether it's due to cash flow or perhaps it's due to restrictions on movement. But there really is a need to financially women entrepreneurs are expressing a need to be able to financially support employees during these times. So that's if you can go to the next slide. All of that paints a pretty dismal picture, but what we're also seeing, and this is really encouraging, is that women entrepreneurs are extremely optimistic and resilient. And this is from our partner WeConnect. I mean, they found in their network over half have identified ways to cut unnecessary expenses in lieu of not being able to get access to flexible financing, and that they've shifted their business models, and that they've also found new ways to do business during these times. If you could go to the next slide. So what is IFC doing in terms of solutions? And we are doing a number of things in collaboration with many partners. I mean, I would say first and foremost, we have our immediate response to COVID was to provide an $8 billion in fast track financing to help companies affected by the pandemic. And this is so that we can help companies continue to operate and also help them pay workers so their workers can continue to receive paychecks. And as part of this support, we are working to address the urgent needs of working capital for women-led businesses. Our Banking on Women program actually just yesterday announced a phase 2 to our global trade financing program, where we are, it's the first of its kind program that's incentivizing banks in 75 countries to increase trade finance to women-owned and led businesses. We're also working to support the digitization of women-led businesses. We have, in partnership with the European Commission, we have a program called Digital to Equal that brings together 17 leading technology companies that are operating in different ways, including online marketplaces, to provide opportunities for women in emerging markets. And there's this whole need to find, I mean, demand is plummeting. There needs to be ways to find new revenue sources. And so we are working hard to increase access to markets through corporate contracts. And so we have a partnership with WeConnect International, and actually on Friday in Colombia, we're doing a matchmaking session with companies that need products and services from women entrepreneurs. And related to that, we're providing guidance and advice to companies on how to diversify their supply chains. I mean, what we're seeing is that companies need to figure out how to de-risk their supply chains, particularly in light of the restrictions of logistics, and how do you go local and find new suppliers. And one way to do this is to find women entrepreneurs that are local. And so we're doing this through our Sourcing to Equal Kenya program. And I would say last but not least is, I mentioned that we are hearing from entrepreneurs they need support on technical assistance. And so our financial institutions group is working with financial institutions and small businesses to provide webinars on topics everywhere from accessing finance during the crisis, stakeholder communication, and more. And they've done over 30 webinars in 7 countries and translated into 7 languages. So there's quite a few. We're trying to tackle all of these different issues in different ways with different key stakeholders. Next slide. So what I have here, and I hope we can share this later on, is a couple of resources and links to all the women entrepreneurs that are on the call. I mean, networks are so critical right now. And so for those that want to connect with corporate buyers, there's a link to WeConnect International, and they're quite global, and you could join there. And if you're based in Kenya, we also have our partner there. But I know it's really hard to find where to go to get support. And so there's a link here for the world. We have a map of support measures in response to COVID. And so you can look up your country and see what resources are there. And there's a couple other resources here in terms of investor and funder resources, and then a guide for e-commerce. And I mentioned issues around childcare and managing risk and pivoting business models. On the right-hand side are several resources and guidance notes that we've put together that I would encourage women entrepreneurs to read for new ideas. And also perhaps there is some solutions to some of the challenges that you're facing in there. So I hope that presentation answers the question that you asked, Saba, in terms of the challenges and the needs and how we're responding to this. And I'm looking forward to hearing from the other panelists that are providing some really great solutions on this topic as well.
Yes, I mean, this is quite an impressive presentation. You provided the first type of granular details in terms of what's happening at the SME level, at the firm level. I mean, we've seen anecdotal sort of evidence in terms of time horizons, cash flows, but and also some of the solutions that you are deploying at scale with your partners, your intermediary banking institutions, and also directly to your clients. This segues also nicely into basically Mahin Admaji, who's the founder of DotOnline. I mean, we're looking at this crisis in a situation where there's been adverse impact in a number of sectors, but also for some of the new generation business models in this collection, tech-enabled education. There's a pivot and opportunity. People forget that the Alibaba and all of those Chinese sort of WeChat came out of the czar's experience. The 2003 czar's was a very formative experience for a lot of Chinese companies that digitized. So Mahin, from your perspective, sitting as an entrepreneur with a successful blended educational business model, how has the ongoing crisis affected your operation? How did you pivot? Tell us more about what you've been doing previously and how you've adjusted your product in this environment.
So thank you so much, Saba. Heather, a lot of what you said really resonated with me, both on a personal and at a company-wide level. So a lot of the challenges that you spoke about, and I'll get into those deeper, because a lot of what you pointed out, we've actually gone through. We've had, we've done our pivots, we've seen that traction, we've run into those problems, and and I wanted to touch upon something that you spoke about, which was mental well-being as well. But before I do all of that, let me introduce myself. So I'm Mahin. I'm the CEO of DotOnline. DotOnline is an edtech platform run in Pakistan. And just before we get into our pivot, I wanted to share our story with you, some of our learnings. So what do we do at DotOnline? So at DotOnline, we have proprietary learning programs in English and math. These programs are blended learning programs, so it's based in technology and also paper-based. They were developed by experts, subject specialists, PhDs. But the very interesting part of DotOnline is how we disseminate our learning programs. How we do that is through a network of micro-franchise partners. We essentially look at this pool of super, educated women in Pakistan. Statistically, women with bachelor degrees, master's degrees, even PhDs. These are incredible women, but more than 75 to 80% of them are not in our workforce. They either drop out of the workforce after a period of time, or they never enter the workforce after completion of their studies. A lot of the problems, a lot of the reasons I won't get into, but they're grounded in, child rearing, domestic responsibilities. So those are a lot of those reasons. So we tap into that pool. They go through this rigorous recruitment process. We train them. And as you can see here, we provide them with all the resources and training to become micro franchise partners of DotOnline. So essentially, we give them all the tools to be able to set up a learning center from their own homes. And they can teach and work flexibly, set their own hours, and they can earn an income working from home. So pre-COVID and before the lockdown hit Pakistan, we had hundreds of these centers operational across Pakistan, and we would connect. We are also a marketplace, so we connect students based on proximity to DotOnline franchise teachers who are running centers in their neighborhoods within a 1 to 2 mile radius. So a part of our business was very, very physical, right? So you had students who would actually, move and go to their closest teacher to have these lessons, to attend these after-school classes. And we can move on to the next slide. And we had our lockdown in Pakistan in March, and all of that changed. So overnight, we had to suspend operations across the country. Nobody could go into, even though we were operating small batch sizes in these centers, but really nobody could attend these classes. And in 2 weeks, we not only had to figure out our cash flow going forward, manage the emotional well-being of everybody who was working with us, and shift to remote learning, but we had this huge network of teacher partners that we had to retrain, and really give them all the tools that were required to shift all of our operations online. So we had to shift them from physical classes to online tutoring. We had to digitize all of our learning content that was paper-based so that we were able to deliver it online. Initially I mentioned we were matching students on proximity to teachers. All of that went out the window, and we had to develop a completely new system of matching students and teachers online through other mechanisms. We had to overhaul our tech component completely to make new SOPs, quality control measures for online learning. And we can move on to the next slide. The silver lining here, and Heather mentioned, like a lot of women-led businesses, we made pay cuts, we took those difficult decisions, we went budget line by budget line. We didn't know, there was a lot of uncertainty on what our traction would look like. But as worldwide in EdTech, we also saw great traction. So we've doubled our student intake. Our customer acquisition cost is down by 70%. Our teachers have a lot more students into the funnel. But having said that, and we can move on to the next slide, having said that, there's been a very, very, very steep learning curve, and we're still grappling with a lot in terms of cash burn, in terms of now we're heading into our third month of working from home. So what does that mental health look like for people who, don't enjoy a comfortable workspace at home, or are struggling with a myriad of problems on the domestic front? What does it mean for all of our teachers who are teaching from home? What does it mean for our parents and our customers? We care deeply about their well-being and how they're managing and kind of really juggling childcare and work, and now these online classes as well that are added to the mix. So I wanted to share some things that really helped us and could possibly help other women-led businesses as well, and maybe make some propositions to anchor firms and banks, where they could really step in and provide help to women-led businesses. So let me start with training. So I think a big component, some companies, we were a tech company, right? But a lot of companies are not tech companies. And right from the bottom, from your employee pool to your customers, there is this upskilling that needs to happen. So for example, in our case, we had to retrain off all of our teachers. And there've been some anchor companies, some big companies globally that already have those modules in place. I would say Zoom, for example, has this great online teacher training module. So all of the teachers who are grappling with how do I go online, how do I manage all of those features, how do I make my classroom engaging, they have a great platform. I think democratization here would mean companies who've developed those trainings, who've developed those SOPs, if they just make those transparent, and anybody could really go and access that. There are companies out there who even work on productivity, like Slack, and who connect employee pools digitally. So it would be so wonderful to see trainings kind of come out from there, speaking on productivity and how to be kind of managing yourself in the workspace digitally. We can move on to the next slide. We had to rethink our marketing. So a lot of the BTL, a lot of the, the trade shows, the seminars, the billboard, all of that marketing suspends. But, I think here the creativity that women-led businesses, I think my piece would be to kind of, it doesn't mean that your revenue needs to stop or your numbers or your customers can't come into your funnel. I think you can really gain traction by tapping into a lot of tools that are cheaper, in some cases even free. For us, the referral network, WhatsApp forwards, kind of just going rugged, sometimes would surprise you in their traction. So WhatsApp forwards, referrals, email marketing, which is really cheap. So kind of rethinking the entire marketing wheel helped us. I know there have been some big success stories in Pakistan who've tapped into just a different kind of marketing, so influencers, getting people to really buy into the impact of what you do, and then having that and them be your spokespeople. So just, some creative ways to keep on marketing. We can go on to the next slide. Another thing I wanted to touch upon, I realized that a lot of companies are not tech, and investment in technology takes, it takes a lot of capital, a lot of expert resources. But, this is something, we needed to shift our systems as well. We needed to shift payments online. We needed to shift learning online. There is a lot of open source APIs that are out there. So big companies that have made millions of dollars of investment into developing these these technologies that one could tap into and integrate into your platforms. And we've done that. And I think on an education front, there's edX, which has open source course management. There's Zoom, as everybody knows. There's Moodle. There's AWS. These are quick integrations that one can make to make that leap to go digital. And, that kind of links and segues into my next point, and we can move on. Which is cash collection. I know payment for a lot of people becomes a real issue, and I'm speaking from a third world country perspective here. A lot of people are unbanked. We have more than 80% of our population, which is completely unbanked. But there are fintech solutions that are out there, and I think in Pakistan, I've listed some that are up there. We use Connect Pay. Our parents all made cash payments, and we had to quickly kind of go online with that. So, tapping into those solutions, and I know a lot of banks present those solutions as well. A lot of them are doing those for free, those API integrations. So maybe look into that, at a customer level, that's possible. And we can move on there. Next slide. I think a government level support. I know a lot of first world countries, the governments have stepped up. They've given rent subsidies, their furlough options. In Pakistan, we've seen very little of that. And, my appeal would be even at a government level for tax exemptions to really help manage cash burn, for options on rent subsidies, for other options, budget line by budget line, electricity, electric bill subsidies, that really go a long way in extending your cash flow. And I can go on to the next slide. My last point was, when as a women-led business, it's been really incredible to tap into good mentors, people who have been our partners, who've been part of DotOnline's history, who've been part of our story, to tap into their acumen and intellect and get them to really help us walk through best, worst case, middle case scenarios. It could be anywhere from navigating, external uncertainties, what those would look like, internal uncertainties, churn, customer retention, inbound leads. It could mean, how do you look at your budget cuts line by line, revenue acceleration, how do I extend my runway? I think opening up the platform so that, and Heather touched upon lots of experts who are willing to give their time to help you rethink your model, how to go digital, what are the options out there. So that I think is really has been instrumental for DotOnline. And, I'm here and, whatever support that we can give. And I know a lot of experts that are out there. I saw Heather put up a whole bunch of resources from IFC, experts who are giving their time through webinars. I think it really helps to take a step back and take a closer look, at both, all different case scenarios within the company. So that's it for me. My contact information is there, and open to any questions. Saba, over to you.
Thank you so much, Maheen. What an impressive business you've built. I mean, this pandemic also makes us realize that we need to use these technology as an enabler for the kinds of essential services that we need. I mean, let's think about what will happen in the fall with all these children and, going to school. I mean, there's a lot to be done. And in order to scale this, we really need to also get governments to build the right infrastructure. I mean, one area that UNDP has been working on is this sort of digital infrastructure. We've been involved in two areas. One is assisting governments to places like Bangladesh to do e-governance and set up the whole system. But the other one is there's a lot of last mile innovative solution like satellite meshes that's usually used for closed loop Wi-Fi. I mean, we can't expect everyone to be able to have last mile DSL infrastructure, but this is a critical issue. I have family in Africa who are trying to figure out what to do in Togo. The government's trying to hire people to come in. There's radio-based, TV-based learning. So I think the key question is how IFC as an investor, but also other sort of organizations working with government can really take this business model to scale and replicate. This segues nicely also into a question for Pura from Banco based in León. Banco, from your work, I know you've been involved with IFC as part of the gender smart solutions around woman-centered design in the development of your products and services. And you have a dedicated facility for women entrepreneurs. Can you tell us more about some of the barriers you've seen in providing direct financing for women-owned businesses and to how to overcome this crisis? I mean, we see this whole, what is exciting for me is this whole range of new business model in telemedicine, in education, and all these things that are digitally enabled are very much led by women-owned businesses. And how can we ensure across the world that the right sort of financing comes to them?
Yes, thank you, first of all, for inviting me to participate and sharing whatever could help our SMEs in these really different and challenging times. At Banco BHD León, I want to give a little bit of a context of where I come from, so you can also understand where I'm coming from with some of the recommendations that I will be sharing with you today. If you can move to the next slide. Definitely, to answer your question, in Dominican Republic, imagine SMEs constitute 98% of the companies in Dominican Republic, and 71% of the jobs come from SMEs. When it comes to women-owned companies, 51% are owned from the micro enterprises of women-owned businesses. Unless as the business grows. So 33% women-owned for small and 22% for medium. And I agree with everything that Heather and Mahim have mentioned before, and there's very common challenges that we see in our country and worldwide too. Let's move on to the next slide. And the main challenges that we see, and this is global, but also local. So in Dominican Republic, we conducted a study when we were starting our gender initiative, which comprises, personal, it goes personal, but also for women SMEs. And we see that these three areas are very, challenging for women for different reasons. Many of them have already been mentioned by my colleagues here today, but access to information, for example, Saba, women do not have the same access, and sometimes I believe it's related to how you operate. You have to multitask in this situation more than ever, but before that, many women have their family, but they also own a business. Many times they run the business from home. So you have limited time to even find information. So when you have the time to go to the internet, for instance, and look for information, it has to be quick. So access to information, and specifically, and I come from a bank, so I'm gonna try to shape this conversation in terms of what you can do with this situation with your bank in your own country. Financial services, women, and that's proven around the world, have less information about what is out there to help me, specifically for SMEs. What are the products and services that I can be using to increase my cash flow, to reduce costs, so to make my product accessible to clients, to be able to pay to suppliers without having to physically do it, or maybe my suppliers do not have bank accounts. So how do I deal with that? So all of these are solutions that banks in general can provide. Information, the next one would be training. a specific and practical training to be able to lead your business more successfully, have better chances of excelling at what you do as a company. You know, many reasons have already been mentioned. The same ones always arise about, you know, the amount of time that we spend as women in doing, you know, chores, taking care of children, which limit what the time that we have, even to learn, even to take a class. But the good news about this is that many organizations, IFCA companies, many of them business call to action too, organizations that are trying to put in place tools that you can use to learn now more than ever virtually, right? Because you don't have the ability to move, and it's more efficient for everyone. So training right now, for instance, how do you use, and Mahim was mentioning before, how she has identified tools that are cheaper to market her business, to do digital marketing like Instagram and other, or more simple like WhatsApp, like she was mentioning before. But having a practical training is a challenge for women, and the access to technology as well. And when it comes to networks, I don't think I need to go into that detail because it's being, you know, broadly answered, that part of what is, you know, the issue about networks and women right now. But definitely women need to be more cognizant. I think it's the first thing for the SMEs that are here participating. You need to know that these are barriers to propel your business in regular conditions, now more than ever. And now that you reflect on that and you can see which are the opportunities that you might have in your specific business in these three areas, then it's the time to take action, as, you know, as possible. So moving on to the next slide, these three areas before COVID, I call it, that I just mentioned, that are obstacles or challenges for women SMEs in particular, then you need to add all the problems that Mahim has been, you know, telling us from her experience. I'm not an entrepreneur, but I have very close family members that are entrepreneurs, and I know this. We've suffered this. So lower sales, low cash flow, operations shut down or just reduced, just maybe because of regulations of the country, because of the pandemic, and costs have risen. For instance, in our country, we receive a lot of goods from the US, and we need to pay in dollars. Well, a lot of the dollars that come into our economy come from people that live abroad, that send remittances to people that live here. Well, we don't have that. Tourism brought dollars into the economy. No tourism until July, when we start, if everything goes as planned. So that drives the costs up, because then the dollar goes up, but you need to buy the goods that you need to buy to be able to continue with your business. So these are situations that add on to an existing problem that we had from before for women SMEs. Now, we conducted a survey for our clients, SME clients, and they told us which are these areas that are pressing concerns to them. And I'm sure many of the SMEs present here today might relate to this. So the business expenses. How am I gonna pay rent? How am I gonna pay electricity? How am I gonna pay social media, community manager? Financial expenses. How am I gonna pay my loans? I have existing loans and now I have a shortage of cash flow. How do I do that? How am I gonna pay my employees? The last resort sometimes is, you know, to lay off people, because people that you have trained, people that have been loyal to your business. So that's very important and a pressing concern. And the relationship with suppliers and how to pay my suppliers, even if I'm not producing enough money now as a business. But not all is bad news. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So I wanted to come up with some sort of a kit that SMEs can use, and I divided it into 3 different stages that we see that can be actually the phases in which your business will, you know, like adapt and recover, hopefully be even more successful than now. Before I go into this, I wanna tap into a comment because I had the same example that Saba mentioned at the beginning. Women entrepreneurs have a potential for creativity, for coming out of the most profound crisis, excelling at their businesses. And he mentioned something that I want to just, you know, briefly reiterate here. The countries right now during the pandemic that have been able to control and excel at managing the crisis are led by women. So keep that in mind, because right now we need confidence. This is not the time where we want to be doubting our capabilities, okay? And we have family members that depend on us, so it's an extra pressure, but it's an extra, I think, motivation as women, okay? So moving on to the, you know, what are the ideas that you guys can think about, reflect upon, and ask? And you're gonna hear this term from me in this last slide a lot. Ask. You need to ask for what you need. Let's go to the protection. So the first phase, yes, thank you. Let's go to the protection phase. So in this phase, you need to try to survive, even to break even, but you need to try to survive. How do you do that with all the problems that you're facing right now that we just mentioned before? Well, one idea, reduce expenses. And some expenses can be reduced and some can't. But for instance, let's give a, you know, simple example. I have a friend who has a business. She hires a company to do social media for her, and you know, they have a contract and she pays X amount per month. Well, she needs to cut down that service. She needs to cut it down because she's not seeing any money coming in from her business. So talk to your suppliers, talk to your business or service providers, talk to your bankers. Banks right now have, you know, I've been participating in many of these forums within banks, just, you know, us banks talking, and everyone, almost all of them that I've, you know, seen are doing something specifically for SMEs too, because in many economies also SMEs are a great part of what mobilizes the economy. If SMEs fail, the economy fails in many countries. And you need to know this because this is some sort of power that you have of negotiation. And banks and financial institutions, from what I see, they are willing to work with you, to delay payment, have grace periods, to restructure your debt, to extend the time of the debt so you need to pay less month by month, to exonerate fees. For instance, many of these repetitively, I see it in our bank, we're doing it, but I see it in other banks around the world. Okay, so don't be shy to ask for what you need. The recovery phase, you need to access finance if possible, if it's a possibility. Banks and financial institutions, unless they're funded with, you know, from a multilateral party, for instance, where they can mitigate the risk, it's gonna be hard to give a loan when it's very uncertain what's going to happen to that company that's asking for a loan. But so if you can and you need it, you should do it. Revisit your model. And I want on all this part of the recovery phase, be always cognizant that the world changed and it's not going back. Digital is here to stay. Digital is here to stay, and everything that you do, you need to be thinking about it. How can I digitize my service or parts of it? Is it, well, it's purely, you know, a person-to-person service that I provide, like a doctor, for instance. Well, what can I do to have virtual consultations or follow-up consultations, for instance, if it's a clinic that we're talking about. So there's ways to digitize, even if it's payments. And adapt and grow. Look at these opportunities in the market right now that you are seeing. Look at your competitors. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Some competitors might have been taking the lead in what you should be doing. So that's very important to look at as well moving forward.
Great. Yes, go ahead. I think it's the final slide. Oh, well, this actually segue well, please go ahead with your COVID-19 offer.
It's okay.
Okay. No, this segue well into Nili and from Mastercard, and really thinking about how digitization, you know, can be seen in this context, and what kind of successful examples of digitization you've seen and what Mastercard is doing to support that.
Thank you, Saba. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes? Okay, great. Thanks for that intro. Everyone, as Saba mentioned, right, my name is Nili Klenoff, and I'm a Senior Vice President of Acceptance Solutions at Mastercard. And I just want to say first that I am humbled and so excited to be here, to be among these incredible panelists. There's a couple of things that I heard throughout the presentation that excite me because, one, I'm going to touch on what Mastercard is doing to address some of the challenges, but it also excites me because I think there's so much more that we can be doing together. So what I'm going to be talking about today is what Mastercard is doing to bring MSMEs and women MSMEs in particular into the digital economy. And if you can advance to the next slide, I'm going to start with a brief story that I wanted to share today. And this is a story about a woman named Candy Smith. Candy she's a fashion designer. She has a fashion design business in South Africa. And back in February, Candy took a business trip to Turkey. And when she was there, all she was hearing were these reports about this health crisis that was coming out of Asia. And when she went back to her home country of South Africa, she strongly suspected that the health crisis was going to reach her, and she knew that she needed to adapt her business. So what did she do? She decided to refocus her business, which was a fashion business, on sewing and making face masks. And a problem, because Candy knew that her customers were because of stay-at-home orders, and so she knew she needed to get online. So she went looking, and what she found was that her local bank was providing a platform that would allow her to get a store built within a few days without any IT experience and accept digital payments. And that's exactly what Candy did. She got her store up and running. By early March, she was selling over 200 face masks a day, and she's now churning out over 1,500 masks a day for individuals, and she's taking corporate orders of up to 10,000 masks at a time. And on top of that, she's estimating that about 10 to 15% of her business is now coming through her digital channel. So why do I share this story? It's a few reasons. One, it's obviously an incredible story about female entrepreneurship and the ability to have foresight and adapt in the face of uncertainty. And those are so many of the themes that my fellow presenters were talking about today. The second reason is that it really highlights the value of going digital and the immediate value that a merchant and a female merchant can get from building a digital storefront. And the last is that it's actually an example of a solution that Mastercard has brought forward to help merchants accept digital payments. So the platform that Candy's bank offered her is actually powered by Mastercard's payment gateway service. And you can advance to the next slide. There's another reason why the story is important. And it's important because it's not a one-off. For over a decade, Mastercard has been focused on financial inclusion, on inclusive growth, and helping build a more connected world where everyone has equal access to a digital economy. One core way that we've done that is through tangible execution, building products and solutions at the market level. Another way that we've done that is really through our commitments. And if we go back 5 years, Mastercard announced we had a commitment to bring 500 million financially excluded individuals into the digital economy. We've now extended that to reach another 500 million underserved and underbanked individuals and to bring them into the digital economy by 2025. We've also announced commitments to help 50 million micro and small businesses accept digital payments and reach 25 million female entrepreneurs through those efforts. Now, big numbers are impressive, right? But this is about a lot more than meaningful numbers. At its essence, what we're trying to do here is build a digital ecosystem, because it's not just good enough to enable individuals to receive funds digitally. They have to have marketplaces where they can shop, because when they do that, right, their money is safer, they have choices, they have a pathway to financial security, and ultimately a pathway to fulfilling their personal and professional aspirations. I also want to share something very important, which is that this is a core business priority for Mastercard. It is a core component of how our business units are evaluated, but also how we design products and solutions, and how our partnerships are formed. You can advance to the next slide. So before I go into what Mastercard is doing to help MSMEs and women MSMEs in particular accept digital payments, I want to ground us in some of the reasons why merchants might be operating in the informal economy. And there's so many reasons, right? There's potential fear of paying more in taxes because there's a paper trail. There's the fear of not getting paid. It's a new channel, right? And that's, there's a lot of unknowns around that. There's, the delay in getting paid. Cash is immediate, right? It may take a few days to get paid in electronic payments. There's the very real cost of electronic payments. Even an inexpensive point of sale solution can cost $40 US. That's really expensive for a merchant in an emerging economy. There's also the challenges that merchants face just getting acquired by a bank. Many bank acquirers are not willing to take on the risk. And then there's onboarding challenges. Literally, many acquirers don't have feet on the street. They don't have a sales force where they can reach small and micro merchants. These are very real and practical challenges. There's also so many benefits to electronic payments, right? And part of my goal here is building the awareness, right? And we're going to talk a little bit more about what Mastercard is doing, but also solving the pain points. There's the very real value of more sales, consumers not being constrained by the cash in their pocket. There's the safety aspect, especially for women, not having to carry large sums of cash around them. Or less cash on them. There's the ability to reach more customers, get more customers through the checkout line. As I already said with Candy, there's the ability to reach customers digitally and not just be reliant on footfall for sales. There's the integration with small business tools. And these tools are important because they're tools that help merchants look and analyze and see the opportunities to grow their businesses. And then last, but certainly not least, there's the access to COVID relief programs, right? We obviously know the crisis that we're facing right now. And if merchants are operating off the grid, they're not going to have that same level of access. They're not going to have access to those relief programs. So really, for us at Mastercard, there's really two duties here. One is that we have to bring forward solutions and partnerships and services that address these very real concerns, but also build awareness around the value of accepting digital payments, because both of these things together are really the first steps in building a digital ecosystem. And you can advance to the next slide. So recognizing, right, that for MSMs and women MSMEs to enter the digital economy, they need to overcome the barriers to adoption. What I want to trace through here is what Mastercard is doing, right? We have a robust set of products and programs and strategies designed to address these pain points. So let's kind of go through just to highlight a few of these. I already talked about the cost of acceptance, right? Well, we've got a number of solutions, but two of them are here. One is called Tap on Phone. That's actually where a merchant can use their personal smartphone. And by downloading an app provided by their bank, they can actually accept contactless payments. Mastercard, and as you guys might have heard from my bio, part of my job is to scale contactless payments globally. And I can tell you that we're investing in getting contactless technology out there, both to consumers and to merchants. And this is one of the core ways that we're looking to do that, to reach micro and small merchants. There's also QR payments, right? It's as simple as a consumer or merchant presenting a QR and a consumer taking a picture of that with their phone in order to make a payment. There's also enabling e-commerce, as I already talked about. This is the solution that Candy leveraged and that many small merchants are leveraging. And in fact, we have many bank acquirers now all over the world interested in lighting up our Simplify platform, which is a platform to allows merchants to build that storefront and accept digital payments without technical experience. And I think we heard already from my other fellow presenters that women in particular, may not have the training. They may not have the technical experience. So solutions like this are essential. And then there's enabling the merchant onboarding. I highlighted some very real challenges that bank acquirers face and merchants face in being able to be onboarded. And there's two programs here that I'm particularly passionate about. One is our payment facilitator program. So this is where Mastercard takes fintechs and we pair them up with acquirers, and we actually educate the fintech on how to help merchants accept digital payments on behalf of the acquirer. We actually teach the fintech the principles around risk management, risk monitoring, and chargeback management so that these fintechs can actually aggregate merchants on behalf of the acquirer. And I can tell you that since the program's inception, which is just a couple years old, we've already brought 3 million micro and small merchants in through the program. And in 2019, 90% of the small merchants that we brought on in India came through payment facilitators who came through this program. I'm going to skip, just in the interest of time, because I know we want to get to Q&A, just to the last piece here, which is on providing access to credit. Saba, just one moment, because I think
Sure,
this is a really powerful program that Mastercard is running in partnership with Unilever. We already know that women, merchants, but women in particular, are constrained by access to credit. And so what this partnership is doing is that it's actually using signals like historical purchasing history to establish a merchant's creditworthiness with a bank, which then allows the bank to extend low-risk credit. And so what's happening now is that, right, the Unilever truck pulls up to the store, and instead of the MSME, the female entrepreneur, being constrained by the cash in her pocket, she can actually buy what she's forecasting based on her consumer demand. You can advance to the next slide. So what I just talked about were obviously programs that cut across both men and women owned and led businesses. But I want to take a few minutes and focus on our focus on women, right? Which is even more important amidst COVID, because we know that populations like women tend to be more vulnerable to the economic shocks that are brought on by crises. So what's Mastercard's vision? Our vision is to design a better world for women. And we do that and we think about that with 3 key pillars. The first is, what are we doing for our own people? The second is, how do we impact the market? And the third is, what are we doing for society? So let's take that first pillar. This is about our workforce, right? How are we helping our workforce? Well, this year we rolled out unified parental leave, providing 16 weeks of fully paid leave for all new parents. And we just launched a female mentorship program that pairs senior executives with more junior female employees for mentorship. I think we've all heard along the way that mentorship and coaching is essential for women to be successful. Moving to the next pillar, this is about what are we doing to impact the market? And it's a focus on women as customers, right? We know that 85% of purchasing decisions are made by women. And but at Mastercard, what we know is that it makes economic sense, business sense, to focus on women. I already talked about the Jazzatuka program. Many of the participants are women. We have our Start Path program, which is a program where we collaborate with later stage tech startups, and we give them access to our network, our partnerships, our resources to help them scale. But what we're specifically doing for women is we are pushing our network of investors and angels to increase the number of female founders and help get them access to capital. And I'm happy to say, and I'm proud to say, that the female founders and startups that are in the program have raised nearly $1 billion in capital. And the last program I'll highlight here is our Center for Inclusive Growth. This is the work, with institutions like Axion and Grameen America to help digitize microfinance institutions to be able to serve women. These are institutions that are primarily focused on women. Grameen has a network of 86,000 female entrepreneurs, and one of the programs that we're doing is a reloadable disbursement card. So again, women don't have to carry those large sums of cash with them. And actually, just one highlight here on the Path to Priceless. This is a program we announced in North America, and it's all about mentorship and advisory and providing that coaching that, again, we keep hearing through this webinar that's so important to women. And then there's the society, right? This is, what are we doing for society? How are we building? How are we using our influence as Mastercard to build the next generation of future leaders? I'll just call out the Girls for Tech program. This is an incredible program. It's in its 6th year at Mastercard, where we focus on educating young girls in STEM skills and helping give them the skills to have STEM careers and reduce the gender imbalance in those fields. And Saba, you can advance to the last slide. So,
one before.
Wait, one more before that, right? So really, what is this all about, right? Mastercard's inclusive growth strategy, it's about providing access to a better life. That starts with a digital economy, and that economy is powered by a digital ecosystem. And Mastercard's role, it's about enabling that ecosystem, whether that's through providing QR payment solutions, helping sellers get online, providing them access to credit. Those are all the enablers that merchants and women MSMEs in particular need as an on-ramp to a digital economy. And Mastercard's focus is on scaling those products and programs. It's also in designing new products and programs to meet the needs of MSMEs and meet the needs of women, but we can't do that alone. And so, one of the key messages that I want to leave this whole group with is that we are actively looking for public and private partnerships that we can engage with like-minded organizations, so we can solve these problems, we can scale these solutions, and we can develop new ones. We absolutely can't do this alone. I think we heard today, there are so many challenges that women, MSMEs are facing. And if we partner together, we can do so much more. And so thank you for having me here today. I hope I answered your question, Saba.
Yes, thank you very much. And you have a very impressive set of commitments to include over 400 million people around the world, and these kinds of solutions, I think, are very much welcome in the context of COVID-19.